So just to show you sort of for some specific diseases, osteoarthritis, chronic diseases, which that's kind of a big category of, it includes kind of genetically and non-genetically related diseases, but hypertension, cancer, this is cervical cancer, but multiple cancers actually are implicated. Those are morbidity rates, and so again, the highest SES is associated with significantly lower levels of these diseases than the lowest, and a pretty steep slope there. These are mortality rates, including infant mortality, and mortality rates can be calculated in a million different ways, and so this captures H, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, 7 of them. Again, a pretty steep slope showing much worse mortality rates. One study found that the poorest white men in, I believe it was England actually, not the US, but England has pretty similar statistics as we do, that the poorest white men died on average 10 years earlier than the wealthiest white men. So this, as Robert Sapolsky, who I will talk about periodically, he's this brilliant biologist who studies this phenomenon. He said, this is not a subtle phenomenon. This is big. This is not a little statistical trend. This is really important, big stuff. People are dying earlier. Ooh, that didn't copy very well. And then just to really hit you over the head with this graph just shows a wider variety of illnesses where this gradient exists. So what I liked about this graph is it includes also depression and anxiety, pain, chronic pain, diabetes, heart disease. The gynecologic problems are a little strange because actually it's sort of the working class who has the highest. But generally you see sort of the trend is worse health, the poorer you are. Questions? I don't look at gynecologic problem. Yeah.
I have a question. Is this been like this for long, or is recently it's increasing more, or?
Good. It appears that for as long as we've been keeping these kind of statistics in the U.S. and Britain, so in the last 50 to 100 years, that the gradient has been here. But it's complicated, so let me tell you a little more about it. Because at first glance it may seem, well, it's just income, right? If you don't have enough money for food, then it's going to be hard to eat healthy. It's going to be, hard not to get depressed, etc. But as it turns out, it's more complicated than that. Because they've calculated these gradients now in all Western countries. And the gradient is steepest in the countries with the largest gap between the wealthy and the poor. Guess which country that is? US. USA. Right. So we have the steepest gradient. So there's something about the unequal distribution of resources within a country that contributes. So it's not just not having enough income, but also the fact that it's every step up the ladder also supports that it's not just not having enough money for adequate needs. There's something about inequality that's a problem here, and that contributes to unequal distribution of health problems. And so this is an interesting graph that sort of demonstrates this finding within the United States. So this is actually, the Robin Hood Index is an index of the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest in a state. And I love the title, Robin Hood Index. It's basically how much would you need to steal from the rich in the state, distribute to the poor to even things out. But basically, so the higher the number, the bigger the gap. And as you'll see, even within states, within the United States, the larger the gap, the higher the mortality rates. It's hard to argue with death statistics, Okay, so how does poverty get under the skin and create these health problems? Yeah, I don't know who's beeping.
I didn't touch it. It's 12 years
So we're actually going to talk a lot today about stress as a mechanism of how poverty gets under the skin to create ill health and disease. We'll talk a little bit about homeostasis, that basically when the body, when the organism, get down to real biological terms, when the organism is threatened physically or psychologically, it has to respond. And what's problematic about humans is that our stress response system is out of date. It's outdated. There's this wonderful book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by this wonderful biologist, Robert Sapolsky. He basically says that our physiological stress response system is great if you're a zebra, or a giraffe, or a bunny, or any mammal, really, other than a primate. Because it's superbly adapted for a physical stress that is quick, that you have to respond to. Remember fight or flight? You either, you're the zebra, you're grazing on the plains, and you spot a lion in the distance. All of a sudden, your heart rate goes up, your senses heighten, so that you are ready to run or fight back. Probably not a great idea with a lion. So you run, you get out of the way, you're not eaten, and your body quickly returns to normal. That's great, it works beautifully. However, humans don't face those kinds of stressors generally, right? Our stressors are not physical and they're not short term. Modern human stress tends to go on and on and on. And is more psychological, which contributes to the going on and on and on. And our stress system is not well adapted for that kind of stress. Just to give you a sense of the kind of stresses we're talking about, this is a way too long list, and I don't expect you to read them all, but it just kind of gives you a sense. I'm sure you all know this already, but the kids and the families we talk to, these are the kinds of things they're facing on a daily basis that make their life more difficult to live. Not having enough food. I mean, we talk to little kids in our research, 6-year-olds, when we ask them, what's hard for your family right now, or what are some money troubles your family has had. We've had little kids as young as 6 say, we didn't have any money for food, so mom sent me to the grocery store to beg for some food from the customer service person. So not having enough food, and as a parent, not knowing how to provide for your kids all the time for food. Racism, discrimination. The statistics about, in poor neighborhoods, there are 3 times fewer supermarkets and 3 times more bars or taverns, making it, again, just more difficult to live your life. Okay, so these are the kinds of stressors we're talking about. Notice they're not acute. These are things that tend to go on and on and on. Okay, so just to kind of quickly review the systems that are implicated in the physiological stress response: the brain, the thymus gland and immune tissues, the circulatory system, the adrenal glands, and reproductive organisms. Ew. So sort of the step one, as we talked about, the brain responds to a stressor. Unfortunately, your brain can't tell the difference whether it's chronic or acute. It just knows there's stress. So it increases alertness, it reduces pain perception. And in the short term, that's great. It allows you to see the threat in the distance and respond. Unfortunately, when you're dealing long term, chronically having your brain making these adaptations degrades your hippocampus and leads to